Hey, everybody, it's Chris. Got a new survivor interview for you today. Today is Rob Prior, and Rob is a stage 3 kidney cancer survivor diagnosed in January 2013. He healed himself naturally, holistically, without any medical intervention, from what I understand, and has also written a book called The Healing Power of Cancer, which I love the title. And so, Rob, thanks for taking the time to tell your story, man.
Thanks for having me on your show, Chris. Great to be here.
So you're in Australia, correct?
Sydney, Australia.
All right. We've heard of Sydney. That's a major city.
The largest population of any city in Australia.
Yeah, that's good.
About 4 million people.
And what time is it where you are?
It's 6 a.m. on a cold winter's morning.
Rob got up at extra early to do this interview for you folks. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me. So it's like, I've been awake for a while. So Rob, let's talk about your cancer journey, your cancer experience. How did you figure out, first of all, how old were you and how did you find out you had kidney cancer?
Okay, quick calculation. It was 2013, so I would have been 55 years old. How did I find out? Well, my health was declining through 2012, but I had no inkling it was cancer. I'd been eating very poorly, not exercising, not getting enough sleep, working long hours, a lot of stress, I guess, with the work. Until January, I was just so ill. I was very overweight from all the poor diet and not eating properly. And I just had so many symptoms. The symptoms just kept increasing.
Like what?
Okay, so there was swelling under the ears, swelling under the arms, headaches, fatigue, anxiety, nausea. I had a massive rash on my lower left leg, a massive lump on my back, and stabbing pains 24/7 in my lower right abdomen. And I had tremors. I was shaking. I was in a really, really bad way. But again, it was because it was all over the body. I had no idea that it could be cancer because I always thought, well, that would be isolated. If you had pain, and I know not all cancer patients have pain, but I thought if you had it, it'd be in one specific part of the body. But that was not the case for me. It was everywhere.
And even some of those symptoms are mysterious, like the rash and things like that. I mean, you wouldn't think that was related to cancer. And heck, maybe it wasn't, right? But it was definitely indicative that your body was really struggling.
Correct. And I should add that I also discovered with the diagnostics that my liver was in very, very bad condition. Barely functioning, actually, was so bad. So really, I was battling two things. The tumor in my right kidney, 6.5 centimeters diameter, and then this liver, which was barely functioning. That might account for the rash and the lumps and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, liver and kidney function. Yeah. Now, obviously there must have been a tipping point where you were like, I've got to go to the hospital or the doctor. Like, how did that happen?
Correct. So it was late January, I thought, and I'd been avoiding going to a doctor because I'm not really a big fan of doctors and all the drugs and everything. But it just got so bad and the tremors were getting so bad. I actually thought I had a neurological disorder. So I went to my local GP at the local medical centre and he arranged a series of tests, being blood tests, obviously a whole series of them, not just one, urine, feces, ultrasound. All of them showed absolutely nothing. And he even said, I think you're okay. I said, I'm not okay. I can assure you, I feel like I'm dying. I'm so sick. And he said, all right, well, let's try again. He arranged another blood test. But when I was at the pathology lab, they took the initiative of asking if it's okay if they did a CT scan. Now, I don't know about in the States, it's probably the same where you are. They're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be authorized by a doctor. They're not supposed to just take initiatives in the pathology lab.
Right.
I agreed to it. And when the result came back, the GP said, well, there appears to be a large lump in your right kidney. And I said, lump? What do you mean? Carcinogenic or benign? He said, well, it says possible renal carcinoma. I'm not an expert. I can arrange for you to see a specialist first thing tomorrow morning, which he did.
Well, yeah, I guess it was serendipitous that they asked to do that scan because it might have been weeks or months before you actually got a CT scan.
Absolutely. It was a good initiative on the part of the doctor in the lab. And It was
What
shocking.
prompted him to do that? Was it you describing your symptoms and to him, and he just thought maybe we need to do a scan?
Well, there was actually the nurse who was administering the ultrasound scan said, just a moment, I'll be back in just a minute. And she came back with a female doctor who asked me, listen, is it okay if we do a CT scan? We've got the machine down the end of the corridor. And I just wanted to find out what this damn thing was. So I said, sure, of course, let's do it. And that's where they roll you under that big contraption, of course, and irradiate your body, which I'm not a fan of, but I thought, I just need to know what's going on. And as you say, serendipitous, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like the nurse maybe saw some stuff on the ultrasound and, went and talked to the doctor about it. So what was the next step? What did they recommend? What did they tell you needed to do?
So I saw the specialist who was a urologist first thing on the Friday morning, 9 a.m., nervous as hell, thinking, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. And, the day before I'd been crying and couldn't sleep during the night. So very worried, very anxious. The specialist was a pleasant fellow, and he held the scans, the CT scans, up to the light, not even a light box, and said, I can tell you, you have renal carcinoma. You have cancer, you've got a tumor in your right kidney. And I didn't want to believe it. I just said, are you sure? Are you positive? He said, well, 99% sure. I said, well, how can we be 100% sure? He said, well, you'd have to do a biopsy, but there are risks involved in that where it could spread the cancerous cells to other parts of the body. So I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm pretty sure this is what it is. And he said, I recommend surgery next week. This is on a Friday. He said, I can fit you in on the Tuesday.
So what was next? Treatment?
Well, I said to him, I'd like to think about it. And he said, I wouldn't think about it too long. And that gave me a very bad feeling. That raised suspicions. I felt like I was being coerced. And it made me want to think about it even more. It had the opposite effect of what he was intending, I think. And so I walked out of, this was at a hospital in Sydney, a place called Randwick, Prince of Wales Hospital, Randwick. Walked down the escalator into the street and again broke down crying. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm so young, I've got so much life to live. This is just, I can't believe this is happening. Bad things happen to other people, not to me. I'd had a fairly fortunate life up to that point. My business was doing well, got lots of friends. I love music and I perform music, and it was the last thing in the world that I'd expect. So anyway, I called a friend of mine by the name of Michael Adamides, who's a psychotherapist who had helped me back in the 90s when I had some pretty serious emotional issues. And he's about 10 years older than me. And I look at him as an older, wiser counsel, even though he's not a doctor and he's not a naturopath, he's none of those things. He's a therapist, but he believes the mind and the body are intimately related, as I do. So I trusted him and I just said, well, this is the diagnosis, Michael, what do I do? He said, number one, don't get the surgery. And I was quite surprised by that, because to be so definitive, normally he's the sort of person who'd say, look, it's your decision and you've got to weigh up the options. But he said, do not get the surgery. I said, well, why not? He said, it's very invasive. It puts the whole body out of whack. It's not just a matter of they cut it out and life goes on as normal. He said, it's a decision you could regret forever. This was his opinion. It's one person's opinion. And I listened to him, and I was inclined to believe that for the moment, for the time being. I said, well, what do I do? He said, I know an integrative doctor that works in the same building in Annandale where I conduct my psychotherapy. He's got a very good track record for curing people of cancer. And I said, curing? Hang on, curing? Do you mean like extending the life? He said, no, curing, 100%. He said, there are people he's treated who are alive 15, 20 years later with perfect health. And the scans show the tumor is completely gone. And I said, that's extraordinary. He said, yes, but in Australia, we've got laws where you're not allowed to advertise that you can cure cancer. I'd imagine you probably have similar laws to that over in the States.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's just as controversial. And not only, yeah, I mean, no one can claim they can cure cancer. And of course not the cancer doctors, because they can't in most cases. But yeah, anyone that's practicing, depending on the state, that's practicing an integrative or holistic oncology, they have to kind of keep a pretty low profile. And
So
it's
this
it
is how
all
I
their typically like this example, most of their patients come by word of mouth.
correct. Well, that's what happened. I heard about Dr. Chris, the integrative doctor, by word of mouth, and he keeps a low profile. In fact, there's certain things that he's very, I don't want to use the word secretive, although I just did, discreet about things he keeps to himself. So I was able to get an appointment with him that very same day. So it's all happening very fast. You've got the GP late on a Thursday afternoon. You've got the specialist 9 a.m. on the Friday morning. And then I was seeing Dr. Chris, the integrative doctor, at 2 p.m. the same day. It's all happening at the speed of light, which was good in a way because I really wanted to get onto it. I thought I'm gonna already, even though I was very anxious, overwhelmed in fact with anxiety, I thought I'm going to beat this thing. This was my attitude. I did not think, oh well, when your time's up, your time's up. I'll just resign myself to this, because I know some people do. And by the way, if they do, that's their prerogative. We all have freedom of choice, and I know people who have said that. In my case, I didn't feel that way. I felt I'm only young. 55, I feel young. I want to get to 100. I want to get past 100 with top physical and mental health, by the way, of course. So I saw Dr. Chris, and you walk into his clinic and it's more like a science fiction movie set than a doctor's office that's got all these electronic contraptions that I'd never seen before. And even when he told me the name, I'd never heard of them before. He said, this is a hunter-metapathia. I said, what on earth is that? Have you heard of that, by the way, Chris, the hunter-metapathia?
No.
It was invented and created in Russia, I think, originally, although the Germans also got onto similar technology. It's where they're able to scan every organ in your body without using any radiation. And so you put on these headphones, which are not audio headphones. They actually pick up the radiation, or EMF, emanating from your brain. It doesn't put radiation into your brain, it takes it out of your brain, based on the principle that your brain knows the state of health of every organ in your body. The brain is an extraordinary organ. So anyway, I put it on the screen, I didn't tell him. He said, what's your issue? I said, well, how about you try and find out? You tell me. So I was being a bit cheeky. I was testing his equipment, saying if his equipment's so good, he should be able to tell me. So he went through and he said, your gallbladder's fine, your heart's fine, your lungs are fine, your brain is fine, organ by organ. And then he said, oh, your left kidney's fine, but your right kidney seems to be in serious trouble there. He said, I don't know what it is, but they're coming up as 6s. Everything's rated from 1 to 6 on the computer screen, on the monitor, 1 being the best of health, 6 being the worst of health. He said it's coming up as 5s and 6, meaning it's in very, very poor state. In fact, he said, you're in a very dangerous predicament here. What's that all about? And I said, well, it's, I can tell you now, I was diagnosed with cancer in my right kidney. He said, well, that makes sense. Look at the screen, that's what it's showing. And then I started to have faith in this machine, because at first I thought, this is very strange, this equipment. And then he said, and your liver's in serious trouble. I said, oh, they didn't pick up on that with any of the pathology lab tests or the scans. He said, well, look here. He said, it's all 4s and 5s and some 6s, not quite as bad as your kidney, but it's in deep, deep trouble. So anyway, to cut the story short, he said, well, we're going to get you onto all these supplements. You've got to get off processed food completely. He said, I only want you to eat organic food, none of this sprayed stuff. He said, I think it's dangerous. It might have contributed to you getting to this point. And we've got to clear all the obstacles that are in the way to allow your body to heal itself. And this is the first person I'd heard say, your body heal itself. I said, but the body can't heal itself of cancer, can it? He said, I'm of a firm belief that it can. And I operate under that principle. I said, wow, that's so interesting. What's that all about? Now, I later found out, not to be precise about this and not oversimplify the story, I later found out from a young fellow called Marco, who actually collaborated with me on the book. He said, have you heard of the cytotoxic T cells in the white blood? I said, not at all. He said, have a look at this video made by Cambridge University using an electron microscope. And it runs for 2 minutes. It's still on YouTube, hasn't been taken down. I don't know if you've seen this video. And it blew my mind. It was showing these, and I had little pointers. These are the T cells. You can actually see them with new technology, recent technology in the last even 10 years. You can see the T cells locating the cancer cells and then injecting them with this poison. And apparently they've got close to 100% success rate in only killing the bad cells, which also includes bacteria and viruses and protozoa and things that shouldn't be there. and almost 100% success in killing them. I said, this is fantastic. I said, is that the cure for cancer? He said, that is a major part of what I believe, that's what Marco believes, is the cure for cancer. He said, everybody's got cancer cells in their body, and everybody's got T cells that are fighting off this cancer from the day, these cells, from the day we're born. And I said, well, then why do we get sick? He said, well, it's when the army of T cells is depleted, and you need to build up the army of T cells. He said, you're asking all the right questions. Keep going. I said, well, how do you build up the army of T cells? He said, you're already onto it to a great extent, but you need to go further. And I think, by the way, if I can blow my own trumpet, I think that's part of the reason for my success is I went full hog. I don't know if you've got that expression over there, full bore, 100% dedicated, not half-hearted. So he also said, no sugar at all. Do not touch it with the proverbial 10-foot pole. And no processed foods. I said, I've already eliminated the processed foods and I've cut down on the sugar. But I later found out from a fellow called Pete Melov, who owns and runs an organic produce store in Sydney, but is really more of a holistic healer. He doesn't call himself that, but he is. And even has an infrared sauna in the corner of his produce store, which at first I thought was insane. But he said, no, it's part of your recovery. It's part of the treatment for your recovery. It boosts your immune system. Back to Marco, he said, it's all about boosting your immune system to the highest possible level, which is largely these T cells. So I've got to say, I had the help of some wonderful, amazing, insightful people who I think you attract yourself, because there's an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah, that's great. I agree 100%. And yeah, I've seen that video, and I'll link to it in the notes below this video. It's such an awesome visual to see an immune cell kill a cancer cell, right? Once you see that, you understand, oh, my body is designed to heal. My immune system, there are cells in my body, their job is to identify and eliminate cancer cells. And so
100%. We've been fed a massive lie, I do believe.
Yeah. And once you see that, understand that it's real, then you also realize, as you did, that you have to take steps to help restore your health, restore your body's ability to heal. And if you have immunosuppression, right, if your immune system is either suppressed or overloaded, then your body becomes an environment where cancer can thrive. And so for you, you said you were overweight or obese, leading up to your diagnosis, and obesity is the second leading cause of cancer, because when you're overweight and obese, you're creating sort of a chaotic, inflammatory and immunosuppressive environment just from that excess body fat. So, and kidney cancer is strongly correlated with obesity. It's very uncommon for a person to get kidney cancer if they're not obese. It's one of those. But
and might I add that the healthy diet accompanied with exercise and the rest of it, lots of water, particularly alkaline water. I lost 30 kilograms. I'm not sure what that is in stones that you speak in, but what would that be?
We don't do stones either. We do pounds.
Oh, no. Okay.
But I'll do a conversion.
Actually, I think it's about 70 or 80 pounds I lost.
It's 66 pounds. 66 pounds.
Is it 66 pounds?
Yeah, and that's a lot.
I had no conscious intention of losing weight, although obviously that was always something that was desirable. But without even trying, when I least expected it, and it wasn't through illness. It wasn't the illness which was shedding off the weight. It was the super healthy food, the organic food, getting off all the crap food. Also, might I say, the night before I got my diagnosis with the specialist, I quit alcohol because I've been drinking very heavily. I'm not ashamed to say, because I actually look at that person as a different person to the person who's speaking to you now. Different outlook on life, different perspectives, different habits, different values. I haven't touched alcohol for, 9.5 years now, which is since my diagnosis.
So you made these massive radical changes to your life, this is the common factor among every person I've ever interviewed, including my own story, who has healed cancer holistically or against the odds or after conventional treatment failed, right? It starts with a whole foods diet, which obviously you adopted, organic whole foods diet, exercising, stress reduction. And what else did you do?
So you just said exercise. I always lump that in with sunshine, fresh air, and earthing. which I'm sure you know is where you run or power walk barefoot on, it's got to be sand, rock or grass, connecting with Earth's magnetic field, which I believe has a very powerful healing effect, which again, we haven't been taught at school, well, at least not in Australia, I suspect all over the world they don't teach it. It's really brought me back to nature. My favorite form of exercise became running at the world famous Bondi Beach. Have you heard of Bondi Beach?
Yes.
Which is just, it's just so uplifting to be, what I would do is swim one length of the beach, which is about 1 kilometer, and then run back to my towel 1 kilometer. But it was more than just the exercise. It was the salt water, and I believe the minerals even get in through the pores of your skin and have a healing effect. The fresh air, the sunshine, the seagulls swooping past, sometimes they almost hit your face, but you laugh and it's uplifting. Anything that's joyful, which, if I may bring the conversation to the power of the mind, because we've talked a lot about the diet, we can get back, I cut out a lot of things out of my diet. In my book, I actually outlined 14 categories of food I eliminated from my diet, and then a whole range of foods that I focused on my diet. And I got to thank you that I think your website directed me to a study done in Quebec where they did laboratory studies where they listed the 15 most powerful cancer-fighting foods. Top of the list, I think, was garlic, and then there's broccoli and onion and kale. I may have the order right, but way before I'd seen that on your website, way before I'd even heard of you, I already was onto that through this fellow, that Pete Mellov, that owned the organic food store. But back to the power of the mind, one of my heroes is an American scientist called Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I'm sure you've heard of, and wrote a book.
Absolutely.
A brilliant, brilliant man. I think he's a wonderful human being too. And he wrote a book, The Biology of Belief, which I love, where he put forward, again, a rather radical, controversial theory that we can actually switch our genes on or off. And he believes 90% of cancer is not genetic. I didn't know about this at the time I was on my recovery path, but I'm fascinated by his theory, where he says that if you're thinking stressful thoughts, if you're in fight and flight mode, your brain instructs the body to release stress hormones into the bloodstream, which cause you to become sick or remain sick, and they would thwart your healing journey. Conversely, if you think joyful, happy, loving thoughts, which might also involve letting go of resentment to certain people, so you're forgiving them, which may, to some people, sound like it's got nothing to do with cancer recovery, but I believe it had a major part in my cancer recovery.
Oh, it's huge. I've been beating the forgiveness drum for a very long time.
I wasn't aware of that, but we're on the same page here.
Yes, absolutely.
But back to the power of the, well, this is the power of the mind. When you think these loving thoughts toward yourself and to other people, the brain instructs the body to release healing hormones in your body, which are things like oxytocin and vasopressin and human growth hormone. And there's one other, dopamine, I think, that trigger the body into healing mode. So it's back to the basic fundamental thesis that the body, I believe, is a powerful self-healing organism if given the right support and the right opportunities. And you really got to give it a big helping hand. You can't just sit back and think, oh, it's going to do it for me. You can't be complacent about it. So being at the beach put me in a joyful state. I'd go down sometimes feeling quite ill, but thinking, I've got to do this. It's discipline. You know it's right, and you force yourself to do it. Even when you're thinking, I'd rather just sit in my comfy chair, I'd rather sit in my office in front of my computer. No, I've made a promise to myself, I'm going to do this, and it's a sunny day, and I'm going to get down and I'm going to exercise and do it. And by the end of my regime, I felt on top of the world. And I thought, what's this all about? I've gone from being a sick person to someone who feels pretty damn good. What is that about? And so just experience, I didn't need books or people to tell me. Experience told me that I was on the right track with that.
That's amazing. We did all the same things, right? Exercise, sunshine, fresh air, eating an organic diet, tons of cruciferous vegetables, forgiving people who've hurt you, choosing to think positively instead of negatively, letting go of resentments and bitterness, and forgiving yourself. Uh, I love Bruce Lipton. He's amazing. I second The Biology of Belief. Great book. Highly recommended. It's in my Beat Cancer book club. That and Love, Medicine, and Miracles is the other one that I think is fantastic. And by Dr. Bernie Siegel. Those two books kind of go hand in hand in my mind, and are some must reads for cancer patients. So, how much time passed between your diagnosis and when you first had an indication that you were getting better? Obviously, I guess you started to feel better, but when was your first medically confirmed improvement?
Well, I'm going to give you a funny answer. I'm hearing you, and I will get there as quickly as I can. I went to this integrative doctor, Dr. Chris, who was good, I would say, not sensational, but good. And, you know, with his supplements and getting me onto the organic food and various other things. And 2 months after to being on his regime, I thought, I'm going to get another scan because I think I'm feeling a lot better. Like you said, I'm feeling better, but I want some tangible verification that the tumor has shrunk. So I went back to Dr. Will, the British GP who I'd seen in the first place, and he arranged the scans. When they came back, he said, well, I've got some good news and some bad news. I went, oh, that's such a cliche. It's like on a movie. It's the typical thing you hear on a movie script. I said, okay. He said, what do you want to hear first? I said, well, give me the bad news. It can only get better from there. He said, the bad news is the tumor has not shrunk. It's still 6.5 centimeters in diameter. And I was really deflated by it because I really thought with everything I was doing, all the cruciferous vegetables you talk about, vegan diet, just everything. And there's many more things I haven't even spoke about. Actually, colonic hydrotherapy, I was doing like twice a week to clean out the gut because I discovered that gut health is of prime importance to boost the immune system, but just for digestion and for overall health is vital. And I was doing these far infrared saunas, not steam saunas, but these high-tech saunas 2 or 3 times a week on the days I wasn't doing the colonics. And I thought, surely to goodness, this has got to produce a result. We've got to be able to see it. And so I was really deflated. And I said, okay, well, what's the good news? He said, it hasn't grown and it hasn't spread. And I said, oh, is that good news? He said, it is actually good news. He said, because these things have a tendency to grow. And he said, honestly, I was expecting yours to have grown, hoping it wouldn't have, but from my vast experience, he said I was expecting it would have grown beyond the 6.5 centimeters. He said, so it's not a bad thing, Rob, that it's actually the same size. So I wasn't really consoled by it, but I said, okay, well, I hear what you're saying. Walked out of the office feeling deflated.
Well, let me interject right there because this is very common, by the way. Doctors, and your doctor, I commend your doctor because he actually did say it hasn't grown, and that's good news. Because a lot of doctors will say, especially if you're doing something that is not conventional, right? They will just say, I have bad news. Your tumor hasn't shrunk, right? And they just leave it at that. It's just bad news. Whereas you can completely flip that and say, wait a second, this is good news. The tumor hasn't grown either, right? And the reality of cancer is a tumor has to stop growing before it starts to shrink.
Interesting. Wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Right? There's a process, right? It has to, obviously it's growing, right? It started out as microscopic. It got to a certain size. It was discovered. So you have to stop the growth first. And then it can start reversing the reversing course. So that's just, it's so easy for patients to get so defeated and deflated and discouraged just by the language that is used by their doctor.
Absolutely. Right? Well, my book actually delves into a whole range of terms that are commonly used by doctors, and one by one, I challenge those expressions and put my slant on it, which is one person's perspective. But after vast experience and research, why I think some of it's very manipulative and we should be learning to think in other ways. But getting back to walking out of the GP's office after this second scan, really I was at another crossroads, I suppose you'd call it, where I had a choice now. It's like, okay, this isn't working, because that was a thought that crossed my mind. Maybe I should do this surgery, or I'm going to double down and go harder on this thing. And for some reason, maybe it's just my optimistic tendency, because I always believe every problem has a solution. Ultimately, not that you always know what it is, I thought, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to go harder on this. I do believe in this. I do believe in the body's self-healing capacities, especially after seeing that Cambridge University video. I must say that was a turning point for me. That was a catharsis. So I went back to Dr. Chris, and he said, yeah, I agree with the GP. It's not the worst news. But anyway, listen, Rob, I've got to go to Cyprus for 3 weeks because he's of Greek origin. I thought, oh no, don't leave me. And I was kind of needy. And he said, no, you'll be right. Stick to the protocols I'll put you on. You are on the right track. I went, okay, all right. Well, I value your help, and I'm saddened you're going. He said, 3 weeks is not long. I'll be back. But then I thought, he's been good, but maybe it's time to find new mentorship. And so I was in that sort of frame of mind. And there was one day I was sitting in my office, feeling really, because there were good days and bad days. I don't know if you've been through that, but
For sure.
Some days I felt really energized, and the body must have been detoxing, I guess, or whatever it's doing. And then other days I'd feel still sick as a dog. And so I thought, I need to find a new mentor. Also, I need a change of state. I can't just sit in front of this computer. And it was a sunny day. Dr. Chris was saying sunshine is medicine, vitamin D, all that sort of stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to go for a walk down the street to the children's playground, where there's swings and roundabouts and slippery dips. And because I love, when children are laughing and screaming, again, it uplifts your mind, which does good things for your soul and your body. So I did. I went down and I sat on this park bench, and I looked across the road. Sure enough, there were kids laughing and screaming, by the way. Made me feel good. Looked across the road, and there's this building with red paint all over it and white writing. And the white writing said, "Don't panic, go organic." I thought, that's interesting. What is this? It looks like a fruit and vegetable shop. Why have I never seen this before? That's weird. I think it's a thing called the reticular activation system, if you want to get technical, that the mind will tend to see things that are at the front or top of mind, and tend not to see things that are not top of mind. So, I was looking for a change of mentorship. Anyway, it said dairy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free. I thought, that's not a normal fruit and veggie shop. Free coconut with every purchase over $10. Far infrared sauna, $10. And by this stage, I'm getting curious as hell, thinking, why on earth would you have a sauna in a produce store? That makes no sense to me at all. So I was just curious, obviously, and I wandered across and met this fellow I kept talking about, Pete Melov, who's 6'4" tall, muscly, slim. I thought he was 35 years old, but I later found out he was 50 years old. So he looked much, much younger than his age. And in fact, he later told me, only trust a medical practitioner or a healing practitioner who looks the part. I thought, yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
That's common sense. But I hadn't thought of it, so it must be uncommon sense.
Well, think about it too. Doctors are dying of the same diseases as everybody else, right? And
Yes.
so what does that tell you, right? They're overweight, they're smoking, they're drinking, they're eating unhealthy food, they're getting the same, they're getting heart disease, they're getting diabetes, they're getting kidney disease, they're getting cancer, right? They're getting all the same diseases.
Sweeping statement, but I tend to agree, Chris. And and this fellow, now what month we're in? We're in May, late April, which is where in Sydney, Australia, the weather's getting cooler, but he's dressed in a tank top, shorts, and barefoot. Now, he said to me, okay, and I discovered he wears that right through the year, right through the middle of winter. So he's sort of like an Amazon man. Very unusual fellow, very extreme fellow in a good way. People sometimes call him Crazy Pete because he's so far removed from the conventional mainstream medicine and pharmacy and all that sort of thing. So anyway, he said, okay, what have you got? I said, well, I've got cancer. He said, cancer is one of the easiest illnesses to cure. Which I'd sort of heard from the previous integrative doctor, but not quite as directly as that. He said, anyway, cancer's just a star sign. And I laughed. I thought, I like this guy, he's quirky. cancer's just a star sign. And I knew he didn't mean it literally. He's just being playful. Then he said, okay, tell me, what do doctors do? I said, oh, I don't know, I'm not good with riddles. He said, they doctor people, they tamper with their bodies. I said, oh, that's pretty harsh. He said, well, think about it. What do they want to do to you? I said, they wanted to remove my kidney. He said, exactly. And why didn't you do it? I said, because I think it's barbaric. He said, exactly. And he said, and why do they do this? I said, just tell me the answer. Just tell me, Pete. He said, because they've been indoctrinated to do it. And this was before that documentary Indoctrination came out. So again, I thought, now some people would think, this guy's crazy. I'm better to go back to a proper doctor who's wearing a white suit and all the letters after their name. But there's something about me that likes colourful characters. And so I warmed to him, and I felt, now I've really got, I was looking for new mentorship and now I found it. But then he started to say, okay, are you detoxifying? I said, well, I don't know. What do you mean? He said, have you heard of zeolite, bentonite clay, diatomaceous earth? I said, I've never heard of it. You're speaking another language. I've got no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, there are substances that can remove toxins from your body. They can remove heavy metals. If you've been eating fish, there'd be mercury in it these days, unfortunately. They remove viruses, bacteria, fungus, all this sort of thing. We should get you onto this. And I said, where do I get them? He said, they're over there on the shelf in my store. And he wasn't trying to do a sales pitch. I could tell the way he's talking. He was just genuinely trying to help me. And then I mentioned to him that I had two friends who are famous rock stars in Australia. And in fact, one of them, I think, was famous internationally and in America, who also had cancer. One of them had a brain tumor and the other had prostate cancer. So I've got my kidney cancer, and then you've got the prostate cancer and the brain tumor. And he said, I'll tell you what, he'd heard of these musicians. They're very famous in Australia, had a lot of hit records on the radio. He said, why don't we get the three of you together and I'll give you the complete rundown of what I believe cancer really is and how you got sick in the first place and how you can cure yourself. And so we arranged a meeting with all three of us, plus the partner of one of them, so four of us, plus Pete, five of us. And he gave us a 3-hour consultation free of charge, which I thought was so generous and so kind. He's coming from the right place. And the meeting, I thought I knew a bit about healing and what it was about, but it blew my mind. It was so informative. And he mentioned to us, we can get back. Do you want to know who the rock stars were, by the way? I don't know if you've heard of an Australian band called The Angels.
No.
No. Well, they had, maybe you're a bit young for it. They had hits in the United States, top 40 hits in the United States. There was one song, Am I Ever Going to See Your Face Again? It was a big hit in Australia, New Zealand, UK. I think it was a hit, maybe the lower echelons of the top 40 in the States. Big star, a fellow called Doc Neeson. And he was 6'4" as well, very imposing figure. But by that stage, he was very sick. He put on a lot of weight. His skin complexion was very pallid and he was in a lot of pain. And the other fellow was a bass guitarist called Don Martin in a New Zealand band, new wave band called My Sex. They had a big hit with a song called Computer Games. Probably not a hit over in your part of the world, but big stars. So these guys were big stars, but now they are brought down to being regular, fragile, mortal human beings who are facing death down the barrel of a gun. So one of the things Pete said to us is, have you heard of Dr. Tullio Simoncini? And I had heard of him, but I hadn't made a big deal of him. I said, yeah, so what? He said, well, he's put forward, he's an oncologist, Italian oncologist, who put forward a theory that cancer is a fungal infection based upon over 100 patients that he'd operated upon. And he'd looked at the tumors and seen that they were white in every instance and thought, what is white? Why would it be white? He thought, well, fungus is white. Maybe it's a fungus. And then I believe he looked at the cells under a microscope and came to the conclusion the cells look remarkably like, or perhaps exactly like, fungal cells. And so this is a whole different paradigm that he was proposing. And it's a theory, it's not truth. Science comes up with theories. There was the old theory of cancer and he had his new theory of cancer. Then he thought, well, what does fungus thrive in? Well, an acidic environment. What does it die and shrivel in? An alkaline diet, which is high pH. And then he thought, well, what's the most alkaline substance that you can safely put into a human being and not endanger their health? Sodium bicarbonate. So I think he was operating on a particular woman who had a tumor that was too close to vital organs. So he couldn't operate. He didn't, well, he could have, but he didn't. It wasn't safe. Stitched her up and told her the predicament. And she said, well, what do I do? He said, I'd like to experiment on you, to try something new, which is to inject you with a solution of sodium bicarbonate. And she said, what other options? He said, there are no other options that I can think of. It's up to you. And so she agreed to it. And it worked, apparently. And he did it on multiple other patients, and it worked most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, which was validating his theory. Then the authorities got wind of it and deregistered him because he wasn't operating within their protocols, which in a sense, I think is unfortunate, but in a sense, I can see why they would have their rules and regulations. You don't want practitioners of any description doing whatever they like, whenever they like. So I think he relocated to the UK, where this time he got official permission to do it on a trial basis. And I don't know whether he's in his 70s now, not sure if he's still practicing it. But anyway, Pete said, you don't have to inject it. You can drink a solution of sodium bicarbonate in water, teaspoon in water at first thing every morning, teaspoon before you go to sleep or before dinner or something like that, which I started to do. And, you know, within 1 week of doing nothing, no other changes but that, I actually felt much, much better. And more symptoms were disappearing. See, I was kind of in an unfortunate predicament and a fortunate predicament at the same time. I had so many symptoms that it was unfortunate. It was making me feel like I was dying. It was just so painful. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 nights in a row I couldn't sleep. I was in so much agony, not pain, but agony, just sheer agony. But that turned out to be fortunate when I was on the recovery path, because one by one, I could feel and see with my eyes the symptoms disappearing. I could see the massive rash on my left leg diminishing to half the size, a quarter the size. And one day I woke up and it had completely gone. So these were my tests, pathology, and I actually then divorced myself completely from the modern allopathic medical system and thought, I don't need it anymore. I don't believe it. I don't want it. I can tell, I don't need their scans and their blood tests, and I'm not denigrating those. For those that feel they're appropriate and wish to do them, that's their personal choice, freedom of choice. I'm a big fan of freedom of choice. But for me, I didn't need it anymore. And then that lump on my back started to diminish, and my nausea diminished, and just the fatigue started to diminish. In fact, I started to experience massive surges in energy, which eventually became massive surges in creativity. And then I actually was in such good physical health, I thought, well, where do we go from here? I hadn't fully recovered. We're talking about mid-2013, about 6 months after my diagnosis. I was in such good physical and mental shape and emotional shape. I thought, well, what's next? Like, I was always wanting to go to the next level.
At that point, 6 months in, did you have any symptoms?
Yes, I still
Okay,
did.
so you still had some symptoms, but it improved a lot.
Well, I still had good days and bad days, which was another measure of my healing. In the early stages, I had 7 bad days a week out of 7, just terrible. By midway through the year, and it wasn't a linear progression, but by mid-year, it was probably down to 1 or 2 bad days a week, depending on what was going on in my body, because your body is frantically, furiously working to heal itself, and it's just genius what it's doing, I think. And could I safely say that neither you nor I, and you've got vast knowledge in this area, Chris, but still, I don't think we really fully appreciate the amazing things it's doing. It's holistic. It's not, when your kidney's healing, it's not just the kidney, it's your liver, it's your gallbladder, it's your lungs, your heart, it's your brain, it's your blood system. It's just everything is working like a team, like a city of people, all harmoniously working together to achieve a common goal, which is to cure you. And this is honestly how I now think of the human body. Not before I got sick, but this is my new concept of what the human body is. So, I had good days. I was down to about 1 or 2 bad days a week, which is pretty good.
Yeah, your body has this beautiful and almost infinitely complex synergy, right? And you have all these systems that are interconnected, working together. Your immune system, your cardiovascular system, your nervous system, your muscles and bones. It's like your digestive system. They're all connected. And so if one system is suffering, it doesn't mean all the others are great. If one is suffering, the others are affected.
Totally. And I do think this is where modern medicine falls down. It's very mechanistic. It thinks of the body just as physical lumps of biological material, but doesn't really embrace the holistic nature of the body. And I'm not going to point the finger at doctors, because I think it's their training is faulty. I think for the most part, doctors are good people. They've got a good heart. They went into medicine for the right intentions, to help humanity, to help people. But then they're being trained in what some people call Rockefeller medicine. Am I allowed to call it that? Is that your perception?
Yes. Well, and it's, tends to be very reductionist and mechanistic in the sense of, if you're looking at the body kind of like a car, right? It's like you get a flat tire. Oh, we'll just replace the tire with a new one, right? You can do it with the car.
Well, a solution, or the car, it might even be the transmission's faulty, which is causing the faulty tire. But I take your point. You can do it with a car. Yes.
Right. And even, the analogy can go one of two ways, right? You can replace the tire and the car is fine, right? Or maybe you're out of alignment, right? And your tire is wearing unevenly. And so the new tire is going to wear on unevenly and maybe blow out over, 20, 30,000 miles or whatever, because they didn't address the real problem.
Absolutely. But again, I've said it. I don't think doctors can be blamed for it. I think I've noticed there are more and more doctors who are starting to become a little bit integrative, where they're still adhering to the protocols because they don't want to lose their registration. But I don't know about your part of the world, but we've got more and more doctors, GPs particularly here, who are embracing nutrition, obviously diet. My GP, you paid him a compliment, and I think he was a good chap, and he said to me, he said, some of the things you've done, I don't really understand, because I talked about Laetrile as well, which are in apricot kernels, how I believe by that stage I was consuming them. This is 2 months into my recovery. And I felt I could tell they were having a good effect. And he said, yes, I've heard about that from other patients. I don't know much about it, and I'm not allowed to prescribe it. It could risk my continuation as a doctor. He said, but listen, if it's working, keep doing it. I embrace and endorse anything that puts you on the path to recovery. And if you're feeling better, he said, I think that is a good gauge of your recovery. So he said a lot of good things that I think he hadn't been trained in, conclusions he'd come to himself after. He was probably in his late 40s or early 50s by that stage, that he'd come to after a lifetime of practicing medicine.
And then that's really, to me, a sign of what I call medical maturity.
Yeah.
Because a lot of doctors, especially young ones, come out of med school and residency and things, just with this know-it-all attitude. And they're very quick to dismiss anything that they don't know about, right? Yes. As being quackery or invalid or ineffective or pointless, right?
Pseudoscience.
Yeah, like nutrition, like anything. Yeah. Oh, nutrition doesn't matter what you eat, right? Oh, supplements won't help you, herbs won't help you, exercise. Oh, yeah, if it makes you feel better, that patients have these kind of conversations every day with oncologists, where it's mostly just this sort of like, yeah, you just, if you want to try to get healthier, eat healthier, but why deprive yourself? Cancer's hard enough. Why don't you just eat all the food you enjoy? This is the kind of things that patients are told.
Yes, and still, in fairness, I'm going to defend doctors a little bit. It's what they've been trained. There's no.
Oh yeah, we agree. We agree 100%. It's absolutely the system, right? It's not the doctors are bad people. They are indoctrinated. They are trained. And med school is brutal. I mean, they break them down in med school and force feed them information and put them in a very narrow sort of scope of practice. And so they're just basically told these are the only tools that work, and everything else is useless. And if you veer away from standard of care, then you are unethical, you're immoral, you're doing a disservice to your patients, you're putting people's lives at risk, so yeah, they beat that into them pretty hard. And so the best doctors, the most kind and caring and compassionate ones, are a lot like the doctor you had, where they have enough perspective, usually, or humility, or both, to say, here are the things I know, and there's a lot of things I don't know. Yes. And I'm not going to be quick to dismiss things I don't know and I don't understand and I haven't been trained in.
Yes. This doctor said to me he believed that within 5 years, which is 5 years after 2013, that we will have found a cure for cancer. At that stage, I thought that's possible. Now I think it's not possible because they're stuck within this same paradigm where they're looking for those magic silver bullets that are going to cure us. I think it's the wrong paradigm. That's putting toxic, artificial, man-made substances in our body. Is not going to be the cure. We've done that for God, 100 years, and it hasn't worked. So there's an old saying, the definition of stupidity is to keep doing the same thing even when it's not working. And it's either stupidity or probably more like greed. I think we have the cure. I think I saw a wonderful documentary called Cancer, the Forbidden Cures, runs for 74 minutes. That was fairly early. That was shortly after I met Pete Bellows. That was 2 months into my diagnosis. And again, that blew my mind where they said in the up to the early 1900s, there were healers right across America, thousands and thousands of them, successfully curing people of cancer, not putting them in remission, not alleviating their symptoms, curing them. And there was a Canadian nurse called Renee Case who had her Essiac, which is her surname spelled backwards, which had all these wonderful herbs, exotic things like burdock root and slippery elm and turkey rhubarb.
And sheep sorrel.
Sorrel.
Yes.
And I'd never heard of any of these things, but she was giving these, selling them, I guess, to these patients with cancer who'd come to her. And they'd come back, a month later and say, my doctor said my tumor shrunk to 20% or 10% of its size or completely disappeared, and they can't explain it. And she said, I told you, she's very humble, so she probably didn't say I told you so, but she said, this works, and I told you it would work, stick with it. So she became a bit of a hero of mine, but then all of that got shut down. And there's also, I should say, Harry Hoxsey and Max Gerson, who are also heroes of mine with juicing and enemas and just brilliant, brilliant healing minds. I think Albert Schweitzer called Max Gerson the most eminent genius in the field of natural healing, which I probably concur with. And so
he did call him an eminent genius, yeah.
Eminent genius. And
in the field of medicine or something like that. Yeah, we're butchering the quote, but it's out there.
It's out there, something like that. And then along came Rockefeller, I believe, in the early 1900s, and had the intention of shutting them all down so that he could then introduce and make a mozza out of his petrochemical drugs. That's my understanding of history.
Yes, it was basically in order to monopolize medicine, as basically when you think of medicine, the word medicine, it has become synonymous with a pharmaceutical drug as opposed to nutrition or naturally derived compounds. So that they were successful because everybody thinks medicine equals drug. They don't think medicine equals food or herbs. And it is unfortunate because even the early the Merck manual for many decades had numerous herbs and natural compounds, nutritional recommendations in the Merck manual. Yes. And they've just systematically were just sort of scrubbed out and replaced with drug recommendations for ailments. So yeah, it's a vast capitalist system that's really been orchestrated and carefully designed and regulated to produce as much money as possible for the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industries, and it's a great disservice to patients and to doctors because they're trapped in a system that pays them well, but it doesn't give them the freedom to practice medicine.
And I think they're in a sort of a catch-22 situation, perhaps, where the income is very attractive, and they've got families to feed and mortgages to pay and the rest of it. And, the ones who start to wake up to the lie that's been spun and to lose faith in the allopathic medicine system are faced with a very difficult situation. Are they going to quit it? And what are they going to do? What else are they qualified to do? And to make, they might have children, you call them private schools over there, expensive.
Yes.
Private schools. In Britain, they call the private schools public schools and the public schools private, by the way. But
oh, really?
Getting off the topic.
I didn't know that.
Expensive private, what do? You pull them out of the private schools, put them into the state-funded schools. it's not that easy. You know, the kids are entrenched there. They've got all their friends. They like their teachers. So, you know,
Well, and
sometimes
it's a 20-year investment to become a successful physician, right? It's a 20-year investment of education and training. And by the time you get to that milestone in your career where you are making money, hopefully, you know, your school loans are paid off, right? You're making good money, and you're basically prescribing drugs to your patients if you're in oncology. Yeah, and then it takes a few more years to realize, wow, these drugs really aren't saving lives. Like, most of my patients are dying. And I've lost count. I've interviewed numerous integrative doctors, oncologists, and holistic doctors, and they all tell the same story, right? They had no nutritional training in med school. They followed the standard allopathic medical model to treat their patients. They saw that their patients, basically none of them got better in terms of chronic disease, and they realized there must be a better way to help people actually heal. And they all had the same epiphanies, right? It's nutrition, it's lifestyle, it's stress, it's your mindset and your attitude, and reconnecting with nature. It's all the things that you did to help yourself get well, and the things that I did to help myself get well. It's all the same things, and that's why I love your story. So.
And Chris, can I add to that?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've said this in other interviews because you really seem to cover all the bases. But just for the record, I believe the same things that I did to cure myself of cancer are precisely the things that anybody could do to prevent getting cancer in the first place, which I find rather fascinating. And in my book, I say, you know, that can't be said for allopathic medicine. Would a doctor say to someone, listen, you don't have cancer, you're in good health, but I recommend a bit of chemo could be good for you to just prevent getting cancer. And also, a bit of surgery, why don't we remove some organs? You've got a family history of a certain type of cancer. Why don't we remove those organs now as a preemptive measure, which is something that Angelina Jolie did. And, you know, I don't want to get too judgmental here. She was doing what she believed to be in her best interest, but I believe was not in her best interest, that she could have prevented those cancers. It goes back to Bruce Lipton, that Lipton says, cancer may appear to be hereditary, but it's not. It's just the same beliefs get passed down generation to generation, such as maybe I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, just to use one example, or the world is a scary place, it's a dangerous place, just little examples. And then it's those beliefs which trigger cancer, but actually can trigger a very specific type of cancer. So it might trigger breast cancer in women from generation to generation to generation. But Bruce Lipton says, if you shift that belief, which you can do through just conscious thought or meditation, or in my case, psychotherapy with, in my case, a very brilliant, capable man, then you can prevent getting cancer without having to do something as drastic as surgery or whatever. So
I would tack on something to that. Belief systems certainly run in families, but also diet and lifestyle habits run in families, right?
And so, even environment, maybe, where you might live in the same household, which lives across the road from an electricity station where you're exposed to those EMFs, and maybe you've lived there for decades and decades, and maybe that's contributed. So it's, as you say, diet, lifestyle, mindset, and environment. Those I'd say would be the 4 factors that can contribute to cancer.
Absolutely.
But I want to take a left turn if I can and mention, you reminded me of a lady I know of Chinese origin, which is relevant to my story, Australian born. Her name's Jane, and she studied pharmacy at the University of Sydney, graduated and practiced as the qualified pharmacist. I think every pharmacy has got your qualified pharmacists who've got university tertiary education, and then you've got the juniors who they've probably got diplomas and certificates but don't have a degree in pharmacy. So anyway, she was the professional tertiary qualified pharmacist, and she worked there for a number of years but became increasingly disillusioned, particularly when she saw older people coming in with 7 prescriptions or repeat prescriptions, and she thought, this is just insane. And she said, what's this all about? And they said, well, I started off with a prescription for the heart, but then there are adverse effects of these other symptoms, these other problems. So I got a prescription for that. But then somehow there were these other adverse effects. So I got a third prescription and it sort of snowballed from there. And at that point, she thought, my conscience will not let me continue to do this. And so she bit the bullet and made what I believe is a very brave and noble decision and quit pharmacy and began studying Chinese medicine, which is herbs and actually, I'm not sure all the different protocols, but one of them was acupuncture, and that is her main practice these days is acupuncture. So I take my hat off to her. I think she's remarkable.
I think that's phenomenal. Yeah, one of my team members is an ex-pharmacist. Yeah, yeah,
same story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just couldn't be a just drug dispenser anymore. Just couldn't do it. So we're a little short on time here, but I wanna close the loop on your story. How long did it take from your diagnosis till your symptoms were resolved, where you're just like, I feel good, normal, I'm cancer free, I think? Or did you have a follow-up scan at some point? Like, how did that resolve?
Great questions. Okay, so to answer the first question, it was 13 months after diagnosis. I was diagnosed on January the 31st, 25th, late January 2013. And I knew I was completely free of cancer, 100% free, by February the 19th, 2014. So 13 months later, what would have been my father's 85th birthday, just as an aside.
And how did you know?
How did I know it? Okay. Oh, by the way, I also would say it's 10 months after I met Crazy Pete,
okay,
as they call him, because he's the guy. I mean, look, the integrative doctor was good. I want to be grateful and credit him, but Pete is just extraordinary. And in fact, he's one of the major characters in my book, because my book is a story. If I can put in a plug for my book, it's
absolutely.
It's not a science. It's got science woven right through it, and in fact, it's got over 300 references to scientific research studies, including the one that I got from you. So I got one from you, and then there's 300 and something elsewhere that are all, what people call proper science. But everything I did, I believe, is proper science. So 10 months after meeting Crazy Pete, where he really got me into the holistic thing of all these different protocols, including more that I haven't even mentioned, which we don't have time for. How did I know? Okay, so on February the 19th, 2014, I was shopping in Pete's organic produce store. He wasn't there, but his lovely staff were there. And he walks in, 6'4", towering, and puts his arms out like a savior, like Jesus or something, and said, "Robert Prior, I officially pronounce you cured." And I was kind of shocked by that. And I sort of laughed and said, "Do you know what, Pete? I think you've nailed it. This last week has been 7 good days and no bad days for the first time." He said, I told you. I said, "How did you know?" Because this is without any scans or blood tests or anything. He said, "Intuition." He said, "Your skin complexion is fantastic. Your aura is glowing. You're radiating with energy and vibrancy." And he said, "And you've lost weight. The tone of your voice," he said, "you just look and sound and feel amazing, Rob. You've done it. I can tell you, you're in the clear." So it was verifying what I already knew, but it's good to hear it from somebody else, and especially someone that I trusted and was so grateful to. He was my mentor, he's my hero. But then I thought, well, that's not enough. Let's go back to the integrative doctor with his Hunter metapathia scans, which showed that the 6s, which demonstrated very poor health, had gone down to 1s and 2s in the liver and the kidney and in every organ in the body. So I had faith in that technology. So there's technology for you. And then I did it again. So that was actually 4 years after my recovery. I thought I should do it because I was running some little seminars in my local vicinity to give people a bit of guidance and just to share my story. And I thought I better have something tangible to show them. And then I did it again this year, early 2022, at a different place that also had metapathia, but I also had iridology scans where, I guess you know about it, they look into your eye with a torch and the eye is a map. And that was amazing because the iridologist said, I am seeing, because it shows history as well, not just your current state of health apparently, which I find quite extraordinary. He said, I'm seeing that you had some terminal, that your right kidney was terminal. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you could have died from some issue with the kidney. I don't know what it was. It's something pretty serious with your right kidney. I said, go on, go on. He said, but I'm also seeing that it's now gone and that potential no longer exists. And I went, man, you spot it, because I didn't tell him what it was. I thought, if this is supposed to be so accurate, you tell me, the acid test. And he nailed it. So that was another test. But then the other test, Chris, goes back to what Pete was saying. All my symptoms are gone. And surely to goodness, if that's not a diagnosis, what is? No headaches, no anxiety, no nausea, no fatigue. My energy was surging to the point where I was back to music, which I'd left behind for 35 years, writing songs, recording songs, putting a band together, performing live. And that's why I call the book The Healing Power of Cancer. It transformed me into a vibrant, healthy person, more healthy, mind, body, and spirit than I was when I was diagnosed or on the downward spiral. So it was actually a blessing, one of the greatest things that could ever happen to me, which sounds insane, but I really believe that because of the path that I chose, not in and of itself. And then the whole mind, body, and spirit detox, which made me become human and superhuman. That sounds a bit arrogant, doesn't it? But really put me in a good place.
If you feel superhuman, who am I to argue with it? It's great. I think I love your story, man. 13 years since your diagnosis, you've been thriving for 12 years.
Well, 9.5, if I'm going to be, if I'm going to.
Oh, 9.5 years?
Coming up to 10, yep.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. You were diagnosed in 2013. That's right.
There was another fellow I was talking about who'd been 13 years. Maybe
got it.
Thinking of him. Yeah.
So thriving for 9 years. And from my own experience, I mean, I've seen how kidney cancer progresses, right? People don't start feeling better, right?
Yeah.
They get worse and worse and worse. And so if they're not getting well. And so, man, I just am so proud of you. It's like, I know how hard it was. I mean, I had to do that hard work too. Changing your life's not easy. It's way easier just to go get injected with some chemotherapy drugs, right? And then just go home and eat pizza and cheeseburgers and milkshakes, right?
Yes.
It's hard to get up and make yourself exercise. It's hard to get up and run the juicer and choose organic produce over, a steak. Like, those are hard decisions, but they do get easier as you get in the groove, and you did it. So, man, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you wrote a book to help people, to give them encouragement and inspiration and resources. We need more survivors writing books. It's like, I don't see it as
right back at you, Chris. I think you're amazing, the work you're doing. I'm a big fan. I think you're doing the world a great service. But can I go back very quickly, extremely quickly? I mentioned the 2 rock stars who were with me in that 3-hour consultation with Pete Meloff, who got exactly the same advice. Everything that we've spoken about, he talked about. What not to eat, what to eat, all the detox, lifestyle, mindset, everything. They got all the same advice. They're in that same room. Sadly, those 2 did not follow Pete's advice. One of them died 14 months after that meeting. The other died 6 years after the meeting, which is better, but he couldn't. His downfall was he couldn't resist the sugar. And he said to me once, he said, "Are you sticking to Pete's protocol?" I went, 100%. He said, "But you've been well for years." I said, "I'm going to stick to this the rest of my life. This is not a fad diet. This is my new lifestyle, and I'm enjoying it. I love it. I feel better eating the healthy food and all the exercise and all the rest of it." He said, and I said, "What about you?" He said, "I wish I could, but what do you do when someone puts a pavlova in front of you?" Do you have pavlovas over there in the States?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's a big sugary pudding with loads of sugar and dairy and it's like a meringue. Do you have meringue?
It's a dessert.
It's a dessert. It's laden with sugar. It's probably more than 50% sugar. He said, "What do you do when your favorite auntie puts a pavlova in front of you at someone's birthday or family gathering?" I said, "You politely decline, Don." He said, "If only it was so easy." I said, "It is." He said, "I don't want to offend her." I said, "You're not offending her. You just explained, I'm faced with life and death, and this could kill me. I cannot have it. But you are beautiful, and I love you, and it was such a nice gesture." He said, "If only it were that easy." So he just couldn't get off the sugar. Sadly died 6 months after that meeting. And here I am, full of beans. I reckon I'll make it to 100, by the way. I really do.
I hope you do. I hope I do as well. You may get there before me, as you're a little bit older than me.
I think I've got 20 years on you. I'm now 65.
Yeah, you do. I'm 45. Yeah. You'll have to tell me how it feels when I'm 80 and you're 100.
Well, at 65, I honestly feel like I did when I was your age, 45 or 40. I feel full of beans. You know, I can swim a length of Bondi Beach, 1 kilometer, and then run 1 or 2 lengths and not be puffing and just full of beans. I can do it easily. It's not these days, it's not a strain. I'm young at heart, and my mind and body are young and clear. And it's like I say, it's one of the greatest blessings that ever happened to me. Can I tell people where they can get the book? Is that okay, Chris?
Yes, please do.
They can only get it from one place, because I'm self-publishing, I'm independent, completely independent, and I've funded it all myself. And it's only available through my web store, which is healingpowerofcancer.com. So it's the same as the title of the book without the first word, healingpowerofcancer.com. And I've just organized US distribution through a friend in Florida, because the distribution houses charge an arm and a leg, and my friend's willing to do it for pennies, which is so sweet of him. He's a friend I've known since high school, which means people don't have to pay exorbitant shipping fees from Australia like they used to. I had a few people in the States buy the book, but they've had to pay too much shipping. Now they just pay local shipping rates, which is a much better arrangement, and they get it much quicker. Instead of 2 weeks, it's like 2 days.
Great. I love it. Excellent. So healingpowerofcancer.com is where you can find Rob's book and connect with him. And Rob, this has been so fun. I'm just so excited for you. You're full of life and energy. You don't look your age. You don't sound your age. You don't act.
Oh gosh, keep the compliments coming.
You don't act your age, you know. And I know you're gonna
bring it on.
I know you're going to inspire and encourage and help a lot of people. And I'm glad you took the time to write the book. Like I said earlier, we need more. It's not about me, right? It's like we need more people healing and sharing their stories, sharing how they did it, because cancer is a big problem and there's a lot of people out there that need help and encouragement. So great to be on the same team with you, Rob.
Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. Great talking with you. Love your work.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please share this video with people you care about. You know how important it is. If you made it this far, you know this is an awesome testimony, an awesome interview, and people in your life need to know that cancer does not have to be a death sentence, that the body creates cancer and the body can heal it if given the proper nutrients and care. So please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.